Take your junk and don't come back here. The locks are already changed. That's what my daughter said to me on a Thursday night in November, standing in the doorway of the house I paid for, while she threw a torn duffel bag onto the wet steps and let it tumble down to where I stood. 67 years old, retired, soaked to the bone, and the only child I had left in this world was looking at me like I was something the garbage truck forgot. I picked up that bag because I had nowhere else to be, and 3 blocks later, under the awning of a closed pharmacy, I opened it. Inside was $480,000 in banded cash and a folded letter with my name on it in her handwriting. The next morning, I drove 4 hours to an address she'd written on the back, and when the door opened, the person standing there made me understand everything I thought I knew about my family was wrong. But before I tell you who it was, do me a favor. Drop a comment below and tell me yes or no. Has anyone ever loved you so much they were willing to break your heart to keep you alive? You'll understand why I'm asking by the time we're done. My name is Elias Whitmore. I ran a transmission and brake shop on the west side of Cincinnati for 38 years. Whitmore Auto. 2 bays, a coffee pot that never got cleaned right, and a waiting room with a TV that only got 3 channels. I wasn't rich. I want you to hear that part, because folks always assume a man my age who owns a house must have piles of money lying around, and that wasn't me. I was the kind of careful that comes from growing up with nothing. I drove the same Ford pickup for 19 years. I bought my work boots one size too big so they'd last. When my wife Adeline got sick, pancreatic, the bad kind, I sold the shop and most of what we'd saved to chase treatments that gave us 2 more good years and then took her anyway. What was left I put into a small brick house in a quiet part of town. Paid off. Mine. The one thing nobody could take. My daughter Daphne was all I had after Adeline was elm. She'd always been my whole heart. When she was a little girl, she'd sit on an upturned milk crate in the shop and hand me wrenches and call herself my assistant. I taught her to drive in the parking lot behind a church. I walked her down the aisle 3 years ago, and she married a man named Trent Mallory. And I'll be honest with you, I never warmed to him. Trent was a financial advisor, the kind with 2 white teeth and a watch worth more than my truck. The kind who shakes your hand and squeezes a half-second too long so you know he's winning. But Daphne loved him, or said she did, and after the wedding they moved into my house, just temporarily, Dad, just till we find a place. Temporarily turned into a year, then 2. I didn't mind much at first. The house was quiet without Adeline, and having my girl under the same roof again felt like a small mercy. Then the pushing started. Trent began talking about estate planning, about how a man my age ought to protect his assets by signing the house over to Daphne. He'd slide brochures across the kitchen table. He'd bring it up at dinner like it was casual. You never know, Elias. One bad fall, one stroke, and it all gets tied up in probate. We're just looking out for you. I'd tell him I was 67, not 97, and I'd thank him for his concern, and I'd watch his jaw tighten every single time. The Thursday it all came apart. Trent put a folder of papers on the table after dinner and told me to sign. Quit claim deed. Transferring the house to Daphne. I said no. He told me I was being selfish, that the house was worth more than I understood, that I was a burden living off the goodwill of the people who'd taken me in. I said I'd built a life inside those walls, and I wasn't handing it over to anybody. He called me a stubborn old fool. I stood up, and the whole time Daphne sat at the end of the table staring at her own hands, twisting her wedding ring around and around, and she wouldn't look at me. That's the part that stuck. My girl had argued with me about everything her whole life, curfews, boys, the color of her prom dress, and now, when it mattered, she'd gone silent and small. Then she stood up and said the words, "Dad, you're the problem. You're dead weight. I can't do this anymore." She grabbed the old duffel bag I kept in the hall closet, the one I used for the gym I never went to, and she threw it at my feet. "Take your junk and don't come back. The locks are already changed." Trent stood behind her with his arms crossed, smirking like a man watching a horse he bet on come in first. I looked at my daughter one more time. She still wouldn't meet my eyes. The door shut. The deadbolt turned. I stood out there in the cold rain holding a gym bag, 67 years old, and I genuinely thought my life was over. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet, gray, the engine just died way. I started walking because standing still felt worse, and under that pharmacy awning, Just to have something to do with my hands, I unzipped the bag. The cash hit me first, stacks of it banded. The kind of bricks you only ever see in movies. I counted 3 before my hands started shaking too bad to keep going. $480,000 I'd figure out later. And tucked down in the bottom, an envelope. My name. Her handwriting. That careful slanted print she'd had since the 4th grade. Dad, it said, if you're reading this, it worked, and I'm so sorry. Every word I said tonight was a lie. I had to make him believe it. 3 weeks ago, I got up in the middle of the night for water, and I heard Trent on the phone in the office. He didn't know I was awake. He was talking to a woman named Renata, his accountant, and from the way he talked to her, I understood she's a lot more than his accountant. Dad, he's in trouble. Real trouble. His firm lost a fortune. Not his money, his client's money. And he's been hiding it with forged statements. He's going to lose everything unless he can get his hands on something free and clear. Something like a paid-off house in your name. I heard him say it. I heard him say the cleanest way out is if something happens to you. A fall. Something at night, in your sleep, that looks natural at your age. And then he forges your signature, takes the house, mortgages it to the hilt, and disappears. I didn't have proof. I tried, but he watches me, Dad. He checks my phone, so I did the only thing I could think of. I made him believe I was on his side. I made him believe I'd choose him over you. So he'd stop watching me and start trusting me, and so he'd think you were already out of the picture. I had to get you out of that house tonight before he could do anything. The money is mine. I've been making real money for years and hiding it from him. I'll explain. Go to this address. The key is taped behind this page. I'll be there. I love you more than anything, and I'm so sorry I had to break your heart to save your life. Daphne. I read it twice. The rain kept coming down, and I didn't feel a drop of it. What I felt was something hot and clean burning through the grief, because all at once the silence at the dinner table made sense. The way she wouldn't look at me. The way her hands shook. She hadn't gone cold. She'd been terrified and brave, and she'd thrown me out the door to keep me from dying in it. I went back for my truck, which was still parked on the street, and I drove east into the dark toward Pittsburgh. I got to the address a little before 3 in the morning. A plain apartment building, 3rd floor, a unit at the end of the hall. Before I could even fit the key in the lock, the door opened, and there she was. My daughter, eyes swollen, looking like she hadn't slept in a week. She didn't say anything. She just grabbed onto me and started crying the way she used to cry as a kid when the world got too big. And I held my girl in a hallway in a city neither of us knew, and I told her it was all right. I was here. I had her. When she finally pulled back, she wiped her face and tried to laugh and said she'd practiced throwing that bag a dozen times so the cash wouldn't spill on the porch and ruin everything. That broke me a little. My careful, clever girl, rehearsing the worst night of her life so it would land right. Inside, she had a laptop open on the kitchen counter and a whole legal pad covered in her tight handwriting. She told me everything. She'd married Trent thinking he was a self-made man, and he'd spent 2 years convincing the world and most of himself that he was. The truth was, his firm, he called it a wealth management group. It was really him and a back office, had taken in money from 40-some ordinary people, teachers, a retired fire captain, a widow down the street from us who'd handed him her late husband's pension. He'd promised them safe, steady growth, and instead he'd gambled it on bad real estate plays and worse personal habits. And when it all went underwater, he started forging account statements so his clients would keep seeing fake numbers go up while the real money bled out. "How much is gone?" I asked. "Almost $3 million, she said. "And he owes more on top of that. There are men he owes money to who don't take checks, Dad." I asked her how she had $480,000 of her own to hide. She gave me a tired smile and said, "Because I never told either of you the truth about my job." Trent thought she made $42,000 a year as a junior project manager. In reality, she'd been building software on the side since college, sold a little scheduling app to a bigger company 4 years ago, and had been quietly consulting for 6 figures ever since. She'd kept it in accounts he didn't know about, under her maiden name, because some instinct, long before she ever heard him on that phone, had told her to keep a door of her own she could walk out of. I think part of me always knew, she said. I just didn't want to. Then she played me a recording. She'd been smarter than she gave herself credit for. After that first night, she'd hidden the little voice-activated recorder behind the books on the office shelf, the kind you can buy at any electronics store. And she'd caught Trent on the phone twice more. His voice came out of those laptop speakers smooth and unbothered, and I'll never forget the cold of it. He was telling Renata that the old man wouldn't sign, that he was tired of waiting on a 67-year-old to do the decent thing and have a heart attack, that an accident at home would be simple, that the police never look twice when a man my age dies in his sleep. Renata asked about Daphne. Trent laughed and said his wife was a sweet idiot who will sign whatever I put in front of her once she's a grieving daughter. I had to sit down. It's one thing to read it in a letter. It's another to hear a man you let live in your house plan your death like he's ordering lunch. This is enough, I said. This is the police. Daphne shook her head. She'd already thought about it. She'd had 3 weeks of sleepless nights to think about it. I talked to a legal aid lawyer on a burner line, she said. Talk isn't a crime, Dad. A good attorney spins it into venting and hypotheticals. If we go now, he lawyers up, he knows I have the recorder, he gets rid of every paper trail, and worst case, he comes back at us. We need him to actually do something. Something on paper. Something a jury can hold in their hands. Forge the deed, I said slowly, because I was starting to see it the way she saw it. If you disappear, she said, he stops being careful. He thinks the only obstacle is gone. He forges your signature. He files it. He mortgages the house. Every one of those is a felony, and every one of those leaves a record. I sat there in that little kitchen at 4 a.m, and I looked at my daughter, and I thought, when did you become this? She used to hand me wrenches. Now she was handing me a plan to take down the man who wanted me dead, and the plan was good. I can't pull this off alone, she said, and neither can you. I thought of an old friend, a man I'd served with a lifetime ago and stayed loose touch with through Christmas cards. Otis Calloway, who'd done 30 years with the Bureau before retiring to do private investigation out of a strip mall office in Columbus. I called him at 7 that morning. I told him the whole thing. There was a long pause, and then Otis said, Elias, give me an address. I'll be there by noon. And he was. What came next took 8 weeks, and they were the strangest weeks of my life. I became nobody. Otis taught me how. We canceled my cards, killed my phone, and I lived in that Pittsburgh apartment like a ghost, paying cash for everything. Otis even ran a little misdirection through old contacts so that anyone looking would think Elias Whitmore had packed up and headed to Arizona to lick his wounds. A debit card got used at a diner outside Flagstaff. Wasn't me. I was 400 miles away eating cereal over a sink. Daphne went home and played her part, and God, she played it well. She told the neighbors her father had stormed off after a terrible fight, and she was worried sick. She filed a missing persons note that said exactly enough and not one word more. She cried at the right times. Trent comforted her in public and got careless in private, which was the whole point. Otis had walked her through wearing a wire and where to leave the little recorders and how to act bored when she wanted to scream. Smud men get sloppy, Otis kept telling me. Just give him rope. Trent took the rope. Week 1, he found a forger Daphne's recorder had caught the meeting in the office. A heavy-set man she only ever heard called Sully, $10,000 for signatures that pass a notary. Week 2, a quitclaim deed showed up at the county recorder's office transferring my house to Daphne. My name signed at the bottom in a hand that wasn't mine. Otis photographed Trent walking out of that building. Week 3, Trent took Daphne to a bank and refinanced the house I'd paid off, pulled the mortgage against it. $900,000, which was about all the place would bear. When Daphne asked, all wide-eyed, whether they could do that without me there, Trent smiled and told her I'd signed everything before I left, told her to trust him. She had a wire taped under her blouse the whole time. Week 4, that mortgage money started moving. A 6-figure payment to men who, Otis confirmed, were exactly the kind you don't owe. Week 5. Trent paid off a casino marker in Atlantic City and bought himself a new car with cash. Week 6, he started planning the thing that would be his undoing. A glossy investor appreciation dinner at a downtown hotel, 150 guests, local press, even a county commissioner he'd been cultivating. Trent's comeback. His coronation. He wanted everyone who'd ever doubted him in one room watching him win. And then, in week 7, came the part that turned this from a fight about money into something I'd have died to stop. Daphne sent me a new recording. I put the headphones in and Trent's voice came through, talking to Renata again. He said Daphne had been asking questions. He said maybe she knew more than he'd thought. Renata asked what he wanted to do, and my son-in-law, the man married to my daughter, said in that same flat tone he'd used about me, if she's a problem the same way the old man was a problem. She walks away with half if she divorces me. She doesn't walk away if there's an accident. I sat alone in that dark apartment, and I listened to a man discuss killing my child like he was rounding a number, and something in me went very, very quiet. For 7 weeks I'd been patient. I'd been a ghost. I'd told myself this was about justice in the house and the 47 people he'd robbed. After that recording, it was about one thing. My daughter was going to walk out of this alive and free, and Trent Mallory was going to spend the rest of his good years in a federal cell. And I was going to make sure the whole world watched it happen. Otis brought in someone he trusted, a former colleague still with the Bureau, an agent named Vera Donovan, who'd been quietly building a fraud case against Trent's firm for months and couldn't get inside. "You've got the inside," she told us, looking at the binders of forged signatures and bank records and recordings Daphne had assembled. "You've got the gaps I couldn't fill." She walked me through the charges Trent was looking at. Wire fraud, forgery, mortgage fraud, conspiracy, the works. 15 to 20 years, he said, if it landed clean. But it has to land clean. Public, too many witnesses for any lawyer to muddy. "He's giving us the room himself," I said. "His dinner, the 15th. We built a video. Otis and I and a forensic accountant, Vera vouched for, sat in that apartment for days laying it out like a man builds an engine, one part at a time so the whole thing turns over. We opened with my disappearance. Then the recordings, his own voice, subtitled so no one could pretend they misheard. Then my real signature beside the forgery, the loops and the pressure all wrong, county stamps and dates underneath. Then the mortgage, then the money. 47 investors, the teachers and the fire captain, and that widow down the street. $3 million routed into gambling debts and a Caribbean account with Renata's name on it and a car and a watch. Then, last, the worst recording. Vera arranged for the hotel's AV system to take a feed she controlled, set to cut into Trent's presentation at a moment of her choosing, and not let go. I recorded the narration myself in pieces when my voice held steady. We ran it until it was clean. I checked on Daphne every night on a secure line. She was running on fumes. "I don't know how many more days of his face I can do," she told me once. And I told her, 5. You got 5. Then you never have to look at it again. December 15th, 6 in the evening. I stood behind a curtain at a downtown Cincinnati hotel in the only good suit I owned, the gray one I'd worn to walk her down the aisle, the same suit a stranger in the comments would one day swear an almost broke man shouldn't own, and they'd be right. I'd worn it exactly twice in my life, and kept it in a garment bag because that's how my generation does. Through the gap in the curtain I watched 150 people find their seats. Investors, reporters, the county commissioner up front, Vera's people scattered through the room in nice clothes, blending. Daphne sat in the 4th row with her hands folded and her face calm, and only I could see her thumb working against her knuckle the way it did when she was about to be sick. Trent walked out into the lights in a suit that cost more than my first car, smiling, waving like the king he believed he was. He had no idea that in 11 minutes the floor was going to open under him. He started smooth, thanked the commissioner, thanked his guests, talked about vision and partnership and getting back to fundamentals, words that meant nothing, slides of upward arrows behind him. He gestured to the 4th row and said none of it would be possible without his incredible wife, and the room gave Daphne a warm little round of applause, and she nodded and smiled, and I watched her pay for that smile with everything she had. Then Trent raised his clicker to show the future, and the screen behind him went black. He clicked again. The speakers gave a long electronic shriek. He turned toward the wings, irritated, and said, "We've got a glitch, give me a second," and clicked once more. The speakers came alive with my voice. "Hello, Trent." Surprised. The color went out of his face like someone pulled a plug. The room rippled with confused murmurs, and then the screen lit up with my face, and the murmurs died. My name is Elias Whitmore. 7 weeks ago, the man standing in front of you planned to kill me, and I'm going to show you exactly how he was going to do it. Trent lunged for his microphone, but the mic was dead. Vera had killed it. He waved at the booth, and nobody was looking at him anymore. Every set of eyes in that room was on the screen, and the screen was playing his own voice, subtitled, telling Renata that an accident never gets a second look when the victim's old. Gasps moved through the crowd like wind through wheat. Then the real signature beside the forged one, the red arrows, then the deed, then the mortgage on a house he didn't own, then the money. And when the investors saw their own names and their own dollars on that screen flowing into a casino and a girlfriend's offshore account, the room turned. The widow from down the street, who I hadn't even known was there, put her hand over her mouth. The fire captain stood up. Somebody shouted, "That's my retirement?" And somebody else shouted something I won't repeat. And then the last recording played, the one from week 7. Trent's voice saying his own wife was a problem to be handled the same way as the old man, and the whole room went dead silent, the way a room only goes when 150 people are all holding their breath at once. Daphne sat in the 4th row with tears running down her face, and for the first time in 2 months she wasn't acting. She was just free. The screen cut to my face one last time. He thought I was old, it said. He thought old meant gone. Then the house lights dropped, and a single light came up at the back of the room, on me. I walked down that center aisle in my graduation suit while the place exploded, cameras flashing, people on their feet. Trent stood frozen at the podium, soaked through, mouthing the word gone like he couldn't make it make sense. "You were supposed to be," he started. "Sorry to disappoint you," I said, and I kept walking until I was at the foot of the stage. Vera Donovan and her people moved in clean and fast. "Trent Mallory, you're under arrest." They had Renata, too, near the back, halfway out of her chair before an agent put a hand on her shoulder and sat her back down. They cuffed my son-in-law in front of the commissioner and the press and the 47 people he'd robbed, and he kept saying it was a setup, a fraud, a lie, and not one person in that room believed him, because they'd just spent 11 minutes listening to him in his own words. Daphne came up onto the stage. She walked right past me to Trent and looked him dead in the eye and said, "I'm filing Monday. You will never touch a dollar of mine." Then she turned around and folded into me, and I held my daughter on a stage under the flashbulbs. And somewhere under all the noise, I felt something I hadn't felt since before Adeline got sick. I felt like myself again. Justice in this country isn't fast, but when the evidence is your own voice on a screen, it's hard to outrun. Trent pleaded out rather than face a jury with that video in it. 15 years federal. Renata took a deal and got 6 for her part. The forged deed was voided and the house came back to me. The fraudulent mortgage wiped clean. What Trent's seized assets could cover got carved up among the people he'd stolen from. They didn't get all of it back. Nobody ever does. But the widow down the street got enough to breathe, and she sent me a card that I still keep on the fridge. Daphne's divorce was final by March. She kept every cent of her own money. Clean break. In April, she and I walked through the old house one last time. We'd decided to sell it. I'd built that home for a marriage and a family, and Adeline's kitchen was still Adeline's kitchen. But the office down the hall would always be the room where a man planned to kill me, and I didn't want to grow old breathing that air. It sold for 1.6. I tried to split it with Daphne and she refused, and then I split it with her anyway because she saved my life and I'm her father, and that's how it works. She took her half and started a small software firm building scheduling and billing tools for community clinics, the kind of unglamorous work that keeps a free clinic's doors open another year. I spent so long hiding what I could do, she told a reporter who wrote her up in the business section. I'm done hiding. I took my half and did something I never expected. I rented a bay back at a shop near my old one and started teaching 2 evenings a week, free, basic car repair, and basic money sense for folks over 60. How to keep your own brakes from costing you $400. How to read your own bank statement. How to spot the sweet-talking man with the too firm handshake before he ever gets near your house. I called it the second thing because I couldn't think of a better name and the name didn't matter. Otis Calloway comes by sometimes and tells war stories the students love. My first class had 11 people in it. a retired bus driver, a woman who just buried her husband and had never once pumped her own gas because he always did it, a man my age who'd been laid off at 59 and was trying to start a little handyman business out of his garage. People ask me now how I did it, how a worn-out old mechanic took down a man half his age with a watch and a plan. I tell them the truth. I didn't do anything special. I had something Trent never had and could never have bought. He had an accomplice. I had a daughter who loved me enough to throw a bag at my feet in the rain and break her own heart to save my life. That's the whole difference. The people who really love you fight for you. The ones who only ever wanted something from you leave the second you stop being useful. So if you're out there feeling old, feeling invisible, feeling like somebody's already started looking at you like furniture they're tired of, listen to me. Your age is not your weakness. The man who tried to bury me made the mistake of thinking 67 meant finished, and it cost him 15 years of his life. 67 means you've seen things. That means you know how to wait, and how to plan, and how to tell the difference between somebody who needs you and somebody who needs your house. Adeline used to say a man is the sum of the choices he keeps making, not the ones he made once. Every morning you get to choose, lie down or stand up, give it away or hold the line. Let somebody else write your ending, or pick up the pen yourself. I'm 68 now. I teach 2 nights a week. I have Sunday supper with my daughter every single week, and we've never missed one. I sleep like a stone in the house I almost lost, and I'm not lying to you when I say I have never in my life been happier. That torn old bag they threw at me wasn't trash. It was the best thing anyone ever handed me. I just had to open it to find out. I think about that duffel bag more than I'll ever admit. For a few minutes under that pharmacy awning, I believed it held the last scraps of my life. It turned out to hold the whole rest of it. That's the part that stays with me. How close I came to walking past the gift because it was wrapped in something that looked like an insult. Nothing about how this ended was luck. Trent Mallory ended up in a federal cell because of choices he made, one stacked on top of the next, each one a little more reckless than the last. A man who decides another person's life is worth less than a house will eventually decide his own wife is worth less than his freedom, and that's exactly what happened. Cause and effect. He didn't trip into ruin. He built it, board by board, the same patient way I'd once built that house. Only he was building a trap and didn't see it closing, and Daphne didn't survive him by accident either. She survived because she'd quietly done the hard, unglamorous thing for years, saved her own money, kept her own door, told the truth to herself even when the truth was ugly. When the night came that she needed a way out, the way out was already there because she'd built it before she knew she'd need it. If I've learned anything worth handing to you, it's that 3 things carry a person through a thing like this, and you can grow every one of them on purpose. The first is simply doing right by people even when no one's watching. That's the foundation Daphne and I had laid over 35 years of bedtime stories and Sunday suppers, and it's the only reason she risked everything for me instead of taking the easy money and the easy lie. The second is learning to think before you swing. Patience. Planning. Knowing the difference between venting and proof. Knowing when to wait and when to act. Otis taught me that the loudest move is rarely the smart one. The third is plain backbone. The refusal to lie down. I was 67, soaped and certain it was over, and I got up anyway. Not because I was brave, because getting up was the only move I had left, and I made it. You don't get character handed to you. You practice it small, on ordinary days, so it's there on the night your daughter throws a bag at your feet and your whole life depends on what you do next. Be the kind of person someone would fight for. Be the kind who thinks clearly when it counts. And be the kind who stands back up. Do those 3 things long enough and quietly enough, and one day they'll be the only things between you and the dark.